What's the price of success? For tech mogul James Wright, it was his humanity. On a crisp autumn morning, the most powerful CEO in the tech industry publicly humiliated a homeless man applying for a job. The crowd watched. Phones recorded. No one intervened. This company has standards that begin with basic hygiene, James had sneered, deliberately dropping the man's resume to the ground. What James didn't know was that this wasn't just any homeless man. This was Tom Baker, brilliant programmer, former prodigy, and a man with a secret that could bring Wright Innovations crashing down. "You're making a mistake," Tom had warned quietly. James laughed it off. Just another desperate nobody. But 3 weeks later, James wouldn't be laughing. His company would be on the brink of collapse. The board would be threatening to remove him. And he would discover a terrifying truth. The homeless man he'd publicly mocked was the only person who could save his empire. Sometimes karma doesn't just come back around. Sometimes it's been planning its return for years. And sometimes it's wearing a tattered jacket and standing right in front of you. The morning sun glinted off the glass facade of Wright Innovations headquarters, a towering monument to success in the heart of the financial district. Inside his top-floor office, James Wright adjusted his custom Italian tie and glanced at his Patek Philippe watch, a ritual that had become second nature after 20 years as CEO. "Another record quarter," James murmured, scanning the financial reports on his tablet. At 52, James had built his tech empire through ruthless determination and an uncanny ability to capitalize on emerging technologies. His salt-and-pepper hair and tailored suits projected authority, while his reputation for cutting down competitors made even board members nervous. His assistant's voice chirped through the intercom. "Your 9 a.m. is here, Mr. Wright. Send them in, Diane," he replied, not bothering to look up from his tablet. 3 executives from the marketing department entered, each clutching folders filled with proposals for the company's upcoming product launch. James barely acknowledged them as they took their seats. "Let's make this quick," James said, finally looking up. "The Thompson merger closes next week, and I need something that will boost our market position immediately." The executives exchanged nervous glances. The youngest of them, David, cleared his throat. "Sir, our team has developed a campaign that leverages our new security platforms." "Boring," James interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. "Everyone's talking about security these days. I need something that makes headlines, something disruptive." For 40 minutes, James systematically dismantled every proposal, leaving the marketing team deflated. As they shuffled out, he called after them. "I expect better next time." "Much better." Diane appeared in the doorway. "Your car is ready, Mr. Wright. You have lunch with the board at Elysium in 30 minutes. James nodded, gathering his phone and briefcase. "And the quarterly reports?" "Already uploaded to your secure drive," Diane replied efficiently. "And Mr. Phillips called again about his startup proposal. Tell him I'll consider it next week," James said, knowing full well he had no intention of returning the call. Small fish didn't interest him, not unless they had something revolutionary. The elevator descended 80 floors, depositing James in the marble-floored lobby. Security personnel nodded respectfully as he strode toward the revolving doors, his presence commanding attention from everyone he passed. Outside, the early autumn air carried a slight chill. James's driver stood by the open door of a sleek black Mercedes, but James paused, noticing a commotion near the building's entrance. A security guard was speaking firmly to a disheveled man who appeared to be in his late 30s. The man wore a faded blue jacket several sizes too large, worn jeans, and scuffed shoes that had clearly seen better days. His brown hair hung limply around a face that hadn't seen a proper shave in weeks. "Sir, I've told you 3 times now, you can't solicit here," the guard was saying. "I'm not soliciting," the man insisted, his voice surprisingly articulate despite his appearance. "I have an appointment." James normally would have walked straight to his car, but something about the man's confident tone made him pause. "What's going on here, Phillips?" James asked the security guard. The guard straightened immediately. "Mr. Wright, this gentleman claims he has an appointment, but his name isn't on any visitor list." The disheveled man turned, and for a brief moment, James was struck by the intensity in his eyes, deep brown and surprisingly clear. "Tom Baker," the man said, extending a hand that James pointedly ignored. "I've been trying to reach your HR department for weeks." James raised an eyebrow. taking in Tom's appearance with unconcealed disdain. "We don't typically conduct interviews on the sidewalk, Mr. Baker. When your emails go unanswered and your calls unreturned, sometimes the sidewalk is your only option," Tom replied evenly. A small crowd of Wright Innovations employees had begun to gather, watching the unusual confrontation. James became acutely aware of the audience. "And what position exactly did you think you were qualified for?" James asked, his voice dripping with condescension. Tom reached into his worn jacket and pulled out a folded paper, creased and slightly stained. "Senior Systems Architect. I have extensive experience in." James laughed, the sound sharp and cutting. "Senior Systems Architect? At Wright Innovations?" He looked around at the gathering employees, inviting them to share in his amusement. Several nervous chuckles rippled through the crowd. Tom's expression remained unchanged. "I've developed several security protocols that would interest your company." "Let me see that," James said, snatching the paper from Tom's hand. He made a show of examining what turned out to be a surprisingly comprehensive resume, though printed on cheap paper and showing signs of having been folded and unfolded many times. "MIT graduate, former lead developer at..." James read aloud, his voice becoming theatrical. "And yet here you are, looking like you slept under a bridge." "My circumstances don't diminish my capabilities," Tom replied quietly. James folded the resume into a crisp square and held it up. "Do you know what we do at Wright Innovations, Mr. Baker? We create the future. Our employees represent the best and brightest in the industry." He glanced at Tom's worn shoes and continued. "They don't show up looking like they're here to wash windows. They don't ambush executives on sidewalks. And they certainly don't present resumes that look like they've been used as coffee filters." The crowd had grown larger, with some employees recording the interaction on their phones. James was performing now, establishing his dominance for all to see. "This company has standards, Mr. Baker. Standards that begin with basic hygiene and professional conduct." James extended the folded resume toward Tom, then deliberately let it fall to the ground. "I suggest you try the shelter on 4th Street. I hear they're always looking for volunteers." A collective gasp rose from the onlookers. Tom's eyes never left James's face as he slowly bent down to retrieve his resume from the pavement. "You're making a mistake," Tom said softly. "The only mistake was the one that allowed you past the front gate," James replied. He turned to the security guard. "Phillips, please ensure Mr. Baker is escorted off the property." "Yes, sir, Mr. Wright." As James walked toward his waiting car, he heard Tom call after him. "I'll be seeing you again, Mr. Wright. Sooner than you think." James didn't bother turning around. "I sincerely doubt that," he replied, sliding into the back seat of his Mercedes. As the car pulled away from the curb, he caught a final glimpse of Tom Baker standing alone on the sidewalk, carefully refolding his resume and placing it back in his jacket. The restaurant was typical of James's preferences: exclusive, expensive, and filled with people who mattered in the business world. Crystal chandeliers hung from coffered ceilings, and the soft murmur of important conversations filled the air. "James, we were beginning to think you'd stood us up," Harold Bennett, the chairman of Wright Innovations Board, called from a corner table. "Just dealing with a small security issue," James replied, taking his seat at the head of the table. The 5 board members present were all men over 60, old guard tech investors who had backed James from the beginning. "Nothing serious, I hope?" asked Richard Kwan, the most conservative of the group. James waved his hand dismissively. "Just some homeless person trying to drop off a resume. Can you imagine?" The table erupted in polite laughter. "For what position?" "Janitor," Harold joked, signaling the waiter for another round of drinks. "Senior Systems Architect, if you can believe it," James replied, enjoying their reactions. "Well, points for ambition, I suppose," Richard said, raising his glass. The conversation quickly turned to business: the Thompson merger, quarterly projections, and competitive threats. James was in his element, commanding the table with confidence and authority. "The security division needs an overhaul," Harold noted between bites of his Wagyu steak. "Simmons tells me we're falling behind in that sector." James frowned slightly. Jack Simmons was the newest board member and a persistent thorn in his side. "Simmons worries too much. Our security protocols are industry-leading." "Perhaps," Harold conceded, "but the market's shifting. These data breaches at Global Financial last month have everyone spooked." "We'll address it," James assured him. The R&D team is working on something as we speak. This was a lie. R&D was focused entirely on consumer applications, but James knew how to buy time. By the time the board expected results, he'd have acquired whatever security technology they needed. That was how he'd built his empire, identifying valuable innovations and bringing them under the Wright umbrella, one way or another. Lunch concluded with handshakes and promises of record profits. As the board members dispersed to their respective cars, Harold lingered, placing a hand on James's shoulder. "That merger isn't a sure thing yet, James," he said quietly. "Thomson's board is nervous after those rumors about our security vulnerabilities." James stiffened. "What rumors?" "Nothing specific, but there's chatter. You know how this industry works. Perception becomes reality if you don't control the narrative." James nodded slowly. "I'll handle it, Harold. I always do." "That's why you're still CEO," Harold replied with a thin smile. "Just don't let anything jeopardize this deal." The board's patient, but not infinitely so. The warning was clear. James watched Harold walk away, feeling a rare flicker of concern. The Thomson merger wasn't just another acquisition. It was essential to maintaining Wright Innovation's market position. Without it, their growth would stagnate, and the board might start looking for new leadership. Back in his car, James loosened his tie slightly. "Take the long way back," he instructed his driver. "I need time to think." As the Mercedes merged into traffic, James found himself thinking about the homeless man, Tom Baker. There had been something unsettling about their encounter, something in Baker's eyes that suggested he wasn't just another desperate job seeker. "I'll be seeing you again, Mr. Wright. Sooner than you think." The words echoed in James's mind. Probably nothing, just the empty threat of a man with wounded pride. Still, James made a mental note to have security run a background check. In his position, even the smallest loose ends were worth tying up. The car glided through the city streets, and James Wright returned his attention to the only thing that had ever truly mattered to him: protecting his empire, no matter the cost. What he couldn't possibly know was that Tom Baker was already setting events in motion that would shake that empire to its very foundations. 3 weeks after his encounter with Tom Baker, James Wright sat in his corner office, staring at the quarterly reports with growing unease. The numbers weren't just bad, they were catastrophic. "This can't be right," he muttered, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair, disturbing its careful arrangement for the first time in years. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Wright, the board is assembled in the conference room," Diane announced, her usually steady voice betraying a hint of tension. "I'll be there shortly," James replied, closing the financial report. He took a deep breath, adjusted his tie, and assumed the mask of confidence that had served him so well for decades. CEOs didn't panic, they pivoted. The main conference room occupied half of the 79th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city. Today, those views went unappreciated as 9 grim-faced board members sat around the massive mahogany table, digital tablets, and untouched water glasses before them. "James," Harold Bennett nodded curtly as the CEO entered. The usual warmth was conspicuously absent. "Gentlemen," James began, taking his position at the head of the table. "I understand there's concern about the quarterly figures, but I assure you—" "Save it, James," Jack Simmons interrupted. At 48, Simmons was the youngest board member, representing a new generation of tech investors who prioritized innovation over tradition. "We're beyond assurances. The Thomson merger collapsed yesterday." James felt the floor shift beneath him. "That's impossible. I spoke with their CEO on Tuesday. Everything was on track." Harold slid a tablet across the polished table. "They issued this statement an hour ago." James read the press release with mounting horror. Thomson Technologies had pulled out of the merger, citing serious concerns about Wright Innovation's cybersecurity infrastructure and potential vulnerabilities in their core systems. "This is absurd," James snapped. "Our security protocols are industry standard. Better, even." Richard Kwan cleared his throat. "That's precisely the problem, James. Industry standard doesn't cut it anymore. Not after what happened to Global Financial." Global Financial's data breach had dominated headlines for weeks. Customer information exposed, billions in market value erased overnight. It was the kind of catastrophe that sent shockwaves through every corporate boardroom. "We're not a financial institution," James countered. Our data sensitivity profile is completely different. Tell that to our shareholders, Simmons said coldly. Our stock dropped 15% this morning. The market doesn't share your confidence. Harold interlaced his fingers, leaning forward. James, the board has supported your leadership for 20 years. But this merger was your initiative, your guarantee. The unspoken accusation hung heavy in the air. James had failed. What exactly are you proposing? James asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Two options, Harold replied. Either you present a comprehensive security overhaul by the end of the month, or we begin considering succession alternatives. The threat was clear. After 2 decades at the helm, James Wright was suddenly fighting for his professional life. 30 days, James nodded, his mind already racing ahead. I'll have more than a proposal. I'll have a solution that puts us years ahead of the competition. That's what we're counting on, Harold said, though his tone suggested counting on James was no longer the board's preferred strategy. As the meeting adjourned, James remained seated, watching as board members filed out without the usual pleasantries or backslaps. Only Richard lingered, hovering near the doorway. A word of advice, old friend, Richard said quietly. The rumor is that Quantum Shield has developed something revolutionary, a security system that adapts in real time to emerging threats. Supposedly impenetrable. James's eyes narrowed. Quantum Shield is a startup. They don't have the resources to develop anything revolutionary. Perhaps, Richard shrugged. But their founder, Dr. Alexander Wolf, was presenting at the Cybersecurity Summit in Zurich last week. Major players were there, including Thompson. With that parting information, Richard left, leaving James alone in the cavernous conference room. For the first time in years, James felt genuine fear creeping into his consciousness. He'd built his empire through strategic acquisitions and aggressive market positioning, not through technological innovation. Wright Innovations developed very little in-house. They acquired promising technologies from smaller companies or, when necessary, replicated them with enough variations to avoid legal issues. Back in his office, James barked orders at Diane. Give me everything on Quantum Shield. Company profile, major investors, technical patents, staff credentials, everything. And find out who this Dr. Alexander Wolf is. Right away, Mr. Wright, Diane replied, her fingers already flying across her keyboard. James paced his office, mind racing. If Quantum Shield truly had developed a game-changing security system, he needed to acquire it, or them, immediately. His typical approach would be to offer a generous acquisition deal and, if rejected, find ways to pressure them into selling. It had worked dozens of times before. 3 hours later, Diane entered with a thin folder. This is everything we could find on Quantum Shield, sir. It's unusual. James grabbed the folder and flipped it open. The contents were surprisingly sparse. A corporate registration from 2 years ago, a basic website with minimal information, and a handful of press mentions. No detailed staff listings, no comprehensive patent filings. This can't be everything, James frowned. They're presenting at international conferences. They must have a substantial operation. That's just it, sir, Diane replied. They operate almost entirely in stealth mode. Their only public face is this Dr. Wolf, and even he's something of a ghost. James studied the single photograph included in the file, a distant shot of a man speaking at a podium, his face partially obscured by poor lighting. Something about the silhouette tugged at James's memory, but he couldn't place it. What about their technology? Any specifics? Only rumors, sir. They call it Adaptive Defense Architecture, or ADA. Supposedly, it can predict security breaches before they happen, using some kind of advanced algorithmic learning. James's interest sharpened. Predictive security was the holy grail of the industry. If Quantum Shield had actually developed a working system, give me a meeting with Dr. Wolf. Whatever it takes. Diane hesitated. That might be difficult, sir. He doesn't maintain public contact information, and Quantum Shield doesn't have traditional offices. Everyone has a price, Diane, James snapped. Find his. The next 72 hours passed in a whirlwind of activity. James deployed every resource at his disposal, corporate intelligence, industry contacts, even a private investigation firm, to locate Dr. Alexander Wolf and Quantum Shield's operations. The results were frustratingly inconsistent. Quantum Shield existed primarily as digital footprints, wire transfers, patent applications filed through shell companies, encrypted communications. Their physical presence was minimal. Dr. Wolf, meanwhile, operated like a ghost, appearing briefly at select technical conferences before vanishing again. By Thursday morning, James's frustration had reached a breaking point. He summoned his chief technology officer, Edward Park, to his office. "Tell me about this adaptive defense architecture," James demanded without preamble. Park, a brilliant programmer who had joined Wright Innovations through one of James's aggressive acquisitions 5 years earlier, shifted uncomfortably. "It's theoretical mostly. The concept has been floating around academic circles for years, an AI-driven security system that evolves faster than the threats targeting it." "Theoretical," James repeated. "So Quantum Shield is bluffing?" Park hesitated. "Not necessarily. There were rumors at the Denver Tech Conference last year about a breakthrough. Someone had allegedly solved the quantum interference problem that had stalled development." "Who?" James pressed. "That's just it. Nobody knows. The researcher never published. Some say they were hired by a private company under an exclusive contract." James drummed his fingers on his desk. "Could we develop something similar? In-house?" Park's laugh lacked humor. "With all due respect, sir, we don't have the expertise. Our security division focuses on implementation, not innovation. Creating ADA from scratch would take years, even with unlimited resources." James dismissed Park with a wave, his mind churning. If Wright Innovations couldn't build this technology and couldn't easily acquire it, there was only one option left: find leverage over Quantum Shield or its mysterious founder. "Diane," he called through the intercom, "get me the attendee list from every major cybersecurity conference for the past 5 years. Cross-reference all appearances by Dr. Alexander Wolf. I want to see if there's a pattern." The data arrived by evening, spreadsheets documenting hundreds of technology conferences and thousands of presenters. Dr. Wolf's appearances were sporadic but had increased in frequency over the past 18 months, coinciding with growing industry buzz about Quantum Shield's technology. James worked through the night, fueled by black coffee and desperation. Something about this situation felt wrong. A company with revolutionary technology but virtually no corporate presence? A founder who appeared just often enough to generate interest but remained otherwise inaccessible? At 3:17 a.m., James found himself staring at conference photos, searching for clearer images of the elusive Dr. Wolf. Most were frustratingly obscured. The man seemed to have an uncanny ability to avoid direct camera angles. But in one image from a Berlin conference 6 months ago, a profile shot offered a partial glimpse of his face. James enlarged the image, enhancing it as much as his software allowed. There was something familiar about the jawline, the posture. On a hunch, he opened another file on his computer, security footage from outside Wright Innovations headquarters, recorded weeks earlier. The confrontation with the homeless man, Tom Baker. James placed the images side by side, studying them intently. The quality was poor, the angles different, but the resemblance was undeniable. "Impossible," James whispered. He picked up his phone, fingers trembling slightly as he dialed a number rarely used. "This is Wright," he said when the call connected. "I need a deep background check on 2 individuals. Determine if they're the same person." He paused. "And I need it by morning, whatever it costs." The report arrived at 7:43 a.m., delivered by courier in a sealed envelope. James tore it open, scanning the contents with growing disbelief. Thomas Baker, age 38. Former child prodigy, MIT graduate at 19, PhD in computational security at 22. Founded his first cybersecurity firm at 24, developing innovative protocols that were widely adopted across the industry. His company, SecureLogic, was acquired 7 years ago by a larger corporation. Following the acquisition, Baker disappeared from the tech scene entirely. The larger corporation was listed as Wright Innovations Holdings, a subsidiary James had established specifically for acquisitions that were later dismantled for their intellectual property. James remembered the acquisition vaguely: a small security firm with promising technology but limited market reach. He'd authorized the purchase, absorbed their patents into Wright's portfolio, and discarded the rest. Standard procedure. He hadn't paid attention to the displaced employees, certainly not enough to recognize 1 year later. The report continued, documenting Baker's descent following the acquisition. His significant ownership stake in SecureLogic had been systematically devalued through legal maneuvers before the purchase, leaving him with minimal compensation. Legal challenges were blocked by Wright's powerful attorneys. Within 2 years, Baker had exhausted his savings on legal fees. Without references from his previous company, now controlled by Wright, he struggled to find comparable employment. A series of personal tragedies followed: divorce, foreclosure, eventually homelessness. Then, approximately 3 years ago, Thomas Baker seemingly vanished from all public records. The same time Alexander Wolf and Quantum Shield emerged on the scene. A note at the bottom of the report confirmed what James already suspected. Facial recognition software gave a 97% probability that Thomas Baker and Alexander Wolf were the same person. James sat back in his chair, mind reeling. The homeless man he'd humiliated on the sidewalk wasn't just another unfortunate soul. He was a brilliant security expert with every reason to hate Wright Innovations. And James Wright personally. The pieces suddenly aligned with terrible clarity. Baker/Wolf hadn't approached Wright Innovations that day seeking employment. He'd been sending a message, testing James, perhaps, or simply enjoying the irony of not being recognized by the man who had destroyed his life. And now, this same man controlled the technology that could save or destroy Wright Innovations. "I'll be seeing you again, Mr. Wright. Sooner than you think." The words echoed in James's mind with new significance. This wasn't just about technology or business anymore. This was personal. James picked up his phone again. "Diane, cancel all my appointments for the next week. And find me the location of every homeless shelter within 20 miles of headquarters." The game had changed. James Wright was no longer hunting for an anonymous inventor. He was searching for a man with a vendetta, a man who had orchestrated the perfect revenge, positioning himself to control James's fate just as James had once controlled his. For the first time in his career, James Wright found himself on the defensive, racing against a clock of his own making. The board had given him 30 days to save the company. But Tom Baker had been planning this moment for years. And if James's suspicions were correct, Baker wasn't interested in selling his technology. He wanted justice. Or perhaps, more frightening still, revenge. Rain pelted the windshield of James Wright's Mercedes as it crawled through downtown traffic. The luxury vehicle, usually a cocoon of comfort, felt suffocating today. James loosened his tie for the 3rd time in an hour, eyes scanning the rain-slicked sidewalks. "This is the 4th shelter today, sir," his driver noted, pulling to the curb. "Wait here," James ordered, grabbing an umbrella before stepping into the downpour. Hope Haven Shelter occupied a converted warehouse, its brick exterior weathered but dignified. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, illuminating a sparse reception area where a middle-aged woman looked up from her computer. "Can I help you?" she asked, eyeing James's tailored suit with suspicion. James cleared his throat. "I'm looking for someone. Tom Baker. He might be staying here." The woman's expression hardened. "We don't provide information about our residents." "Please," James said, the word unfamiliar on his tongue. "It's important. I owe him." Something in James's tone must have registered because the woman studied him more carefully. "You're that CEO, aren't you? From the video." James stiffened. "Video?" She turned her computer monitor, showing a social media page where a video had garnered millions of views. James recognized it immediately, his confrontation with Baker outside Wright Innovations. Someone had recorded the entire humiliating exchange, his cruelty captured for the world to see. "Mr. Baker left 3 days ago," the woman said, her voice cold. "Said he had an important meeting." James felt panic rising. "Did he mention where?" "It's crucial I find him." "Why should I help you?" she challenged. "After what you did." James had never begged for anything in his life, but desperation changed everything. "Because the fate of thousands of employees depends on it." "Please." The woman hesitated, then sighed. "He mentioned something about coming full circle. Said the answer was where it all began." Where it all began. James rushed back to his car, mind racing. SecureLogic's original offices had been in the tech district. If Baker was planning his endgame, that might be where he'd go. The Parkview building on 8th Street. James instructed his driver. "Fast as you can." The Parkview building had changed in the years since Wright Innovations had swallowed SecureLogic. What had once been a small tech incubator now housed a coffee chain, a fitness studio, and various offices. James pushed through the revolving door, scanning the directory. Suite 512 caught his eye. Quantum Shield Technologies, appointment only. The elevator ride to the 5th floor felt eternal. The corridor was quiet. Most offices closed for the evening. Suite 512's frosted glass door bore a simple logo, a stylized shield with a binary pattern. James hesitated, then knocked. No response. He tried the handle, unlocked. The office beyond was minimalist. A reception desk, a few chairs, and a single interior door. "Hello," James called. The inner door opened, and there stood Tom Baker. Gone was the disheveled appearance. His hair was neatly trimmed, his face cleanly shaved. He wore a charcoal suit that rivaled James's in quality. Only his eyes remained the same, intelligent, resolute, and filled with quiet satisfaction. "James Wright," Tom said, his voice reflecting neither surprise nor anger. "Right on schedule." "Baker," James acknowledged. "Or should I call you Dr. Wolf?" Tom smiled thinly. "I wondered when you'd figure it out." "You've gone to extraordinary lengths for this meeting," James said, struggling to maintain composure. 7 years, Tom corrected. 7 years planning, building, waiting for the perfect moment. He gestured to a chair. "Please sit. We have much to discuss." James remained standing. "You engineered this entire situation. The rumors about our security vulnerabilities, Thompson backing out, it was all you." "I merely pointed out existing weaknesses," Tom replied. "Vulnerabilities your team should have identified years ago. The same vulnerabilities I warned about before you dismantled my company." "Business is business," James said defensively. "Acquisitions happen every day." Tom's expression hardened. "What you did wasn't business. It was theft. You didn't acquire Secure Logic, you destroyed it. You stripped our patents, fired our people, and made sure I couldn't rebuild elsewhere." The accusation hung heavy between them. James had orchestrated dozens of similar takeovers, never considering the human cost. "What do you want?" James finally asked. "Money," Tom laughed, the sound devoid of humor. "If I wanted money, I'd have sold ADA to your competitors months ago." Thompson offered 9 figures. "Then what?" "Justice," Tom said simply. "Tomorrow morning, your board convenes to discuss the company's security crisis. You'll present them with 2 options." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were 2 documents, an acquisition proposal for Quantum Shield at a reasonable price, and a letter of resignation from James Wright. "You're insane," James sputtered. "I built Wright Innovations. I'm not walking away. Like I was forced to walk away from Secure Logic?" Tom countered. "The difference is, I'm giving you a choice. More than you gave me." James felt trapped. "The board would never accept my resignation. They will when they learn the truth," Tom said quietly, pressing a button on his desk. A screen descended from the ceiling, displaying internal Wright Innovations emails and documents, evidence of corporate espionage, patent infringement, and systematic destruction of acquired companies. James recognized his own words, damning in their callousness. "Where did you get these?" James whispered. "You forget what I specialized in, security systems," Tom replied. "Your corporate firewalls have been compromised for years. Every underhanded tactic, every legal manipulation, all documented and ready for disclosure." James sank into the chair, defeat washing over him. "You'll destroy the company. Thousands of innocent employees will suffer. That's why I'm offering the acquisition option," Tom explained. "Wright Innovations gets ADA, which genuinely is revolutionary. The company survives. The only difference is you won't be running it." For the first time in his career, James Wright had no counter move, no leverage to exploit. Tom Baker had orchestrated the perfect endgame. "The board meeting is at 9, Tom continued. "I'll be there, either as your company's savior or its executioner. Your choice." The Wright Innovations boardroom fell silent as James concluded his presentation. 10 board members sat in stunned disbelief, alternating glances between James and Tom, who stood calmly at the opposite end of the table. "Let me clarify," Harold Bennett said slowly. "You're recommending we acquire Quantum Shield and accept your resignation." James nodded, the motion almost imperceptible. "It's the best path forward for the company." Jack Simmons studied Tom with newfound respect. "And Dr. Baker, formerly Wolf, your ADA system can be integrated immediately?" "Within 30 days, Tom confirmed. "Your security vulnerabilities will be eliminated, and Wright Innovations will have exclusive licensing for 3 years before we consider other clients." The board members exchanged looks. The proposal was surprisingly reasonable, almost generous considering the circumstances. "We'll need to discuss this privately," Harold announced, signaling for James and Tom to leave. In the hallway, the two men stood in silence. Finally, James spoke. "You've won, Baker." "Completely." Tom shook his head. "This wasn't about winning. It was about setting things right. By taking everything from me." James asked bitterly. "I'm taking your title, not your wealth," Tom corrected. "You'll remain a major shareholder. The difference is, you'll no longer have the power to destroy people's lives on a whim." Before James could respond, the boardroom door opened. Harold Bennett emerged, his expression solemn. "The board has voted unanimously to accept both proposals," he announced. "Dr. Baker, welcome to Wright Innovations. James, the company thanks you for your years of service." Just like that, it was done. 20 years of power ended in a 15-minute deliberation. James felt strangely hollow as he watched Tom shake hands with each board member, already discussing implementation timelines for ADA. As the meeting dispersed, James found himself alone with Tom once more. "What happens now?" James asked. Tom considered him thoughtfully. "That depends on you. This can be an ending, or it could be something else." "What do you mean?" "The company needs your knowledge during the transition," Tom explained. "And perhaps there's value in keeping someone who understands the cost of ruthlessness." James blinked in surprise. "You're offering me a position?" "Advisory capacity only," Tom clarified, "with very clear ethical guidelines." The offer was unexpected, a small mercy James knew he didn't deserve. "Why would you do that?" he asked. Tom's expression softened slightly. "Because unlike you, I understand that business doesn't have to destroy lives. It can build them up instead." He extended his hand. "It's your choice, James." Again, looking at the outstretched hand, James Wright faced the most important decision of his career, not about power or profit, but redemption. And for the first time, he made the right choice.